Hi. So the other day, Dory here from Peppered Cow. So the other day I shared a banana bread recipe on Peppered Cow so that we could all do this together. I'm gonna do a couple of things here today, I'm hoping. And I'm gonna make 2 loaves. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna look at this recipe and we're going to double it. Now, I already have my pans prepared. I sprayed them, I sprinkled flour in them. I had excess flour, and today I'm putting the excess flour in a jar because I have a roast in the oven and I'm going to make gravy. So I put the excess flour in here because if it did pick up a little oil, it's not gonna hurt anything. Okay, and then, so my recipe is over here and it calls for you to, first thing you're going to do is cream your butter and sugar. So the recipe calls for 1/2 cup of butter. I'm doubling the recipe, so that's going to be 1 cup of butter. So 1 cup of butter equals 2 sticks, and the greatest thing about butter sticks is they have the measurements right on the side so that you can easily look at them for reference. If you don't remember how much they are, they're right there. Okay, so I'm just gonna set those aside. I got my butter and I've just got a paddle attachment and I don't have the scraper attachment on it for right now. Before I measure my sugar and put it in there, I'm going to share with you guys another one of my little tricks that I like to do. And that is, I get to open a brand new, and my hands are, there we go. I like to do this. So this recipe calls for, my recipe's right over here. I clip it to my knife rack. All right, so the recipe calls for a teaspoon of baking powder and a teaspoon of baking soda. So I'm gonna use 2 teaspoons because remember, we're doubling the recipe. Okay, so I have 1 teaspoon of baking soda and I am putting that into my, and you should always use the little thing to measure it to get it level, okay? And then I'm gonna sprinkle that into my 1 cup of buttermilk because this recipe does call for buttermilk. There is a buttermilk substitute. For every cup of milk, you add 2 tablespoons of, 1 tablespoon, excuse me, of white vinegar, and then you can use milk to substitute. You also could rehydrate some buttermilk powder with water and create buttermilk. So anyway, the 2nd teaspoon is going right on top of my buttermilk. And what that does is it starts to activate this buttermilk a little bit and it makes it froth up and foamy a little bit, which means that it's got some good rising action happening there. Okay, so I have in this bowl right here, I already have 3 cups of flour. The recipe called for 2, I'm doubling the recipe, that's 4. So the other thing I want to show you is, I'm gonna push this back a little bit and I'm gonna probably arrange this a little bit and hopefully we can all stay together here. Measuring flour. What you wanna do when you're measuring flour, and I will hold this up, is you want to stir your flour. Hardly anybody I know sifts flour anymore. We used to do that back in the day. Okay, so you're going to lightly stir that flour and then you're going to take very light tablespoons of it at a time. You don't want to pack your flour. You don't just ever want to stick that measuring cup like straight in there, okay? Now what we're gonna do is, I have the flour under here by me. I'm going to measure it level, okay? So besides not packing the flour, you're going to want to measure it level. So that means that we want to take a knife, the back side of it, a butter knife, and we want to level that. I'm gonna add this to the bowl with the rest of my flour and I'm gonna set this aside because I'm finished with that. And now we'll just, oops. I'm sorry, we'll just have a little more technical difficulties than we usually like to have. So, that was fun. Not really. It's gonna look terrible on the replay. Anyway, so I have the flour here and now I'm going to measure my sugar. And here's another like quick tip that I think is a really good tip for people that are trying to cut down a little bit on their sugar. The recipe calls for 1 1/3 cups of sugar. You do not need 1 1/3 cups of sugar. So sometimes it's okay not to follow a recipe because that's a lot of sugar. So it is 2 loaves of bread. So I am going to, first of all, pop my butter down there and get that started. I'm gonna measure 2 cups of sugar. And I have the raw wash sugar again, and I think I showed you guys that the other day. So I'm busy getting 1 cup of sugar in that. And then I'm gonna slowly add it to my butter, just so that it continues to cream. So we're creaming butter and sugar. So whenever you hear cream, butter, sugar, you can start getting the butter a little soft first, and then you can start adding your sugar slowly. And there's 1 cup, and then we're gonna do another cup of raw washed sugar. And raw washed sugar, as you know, I absolutely love. So that is in there, getting all happy with the sugar. And again, you're gonna wanna use the back of your knife to level that off so you don't get too much. And I think I am just a little bit shy. So we're gonna add the other cup of sugar right here, and then we're gonna stop it, and we're gonna get the, I spilled some, that happens. I'm gonna replace that. And then I'm gonna get this sugar out of my way. All right, and I have a very small workspace in my kitchen. It's really not much bigger than what I have in my food truck, which is kind of crazy, but so far I've made it work. So anyway, just gonna put my flour and my sugar down here for a minute out of my way, because I still have to measure baking powder. Now there's also a cup of, or 2 teaspoons of baking powder. The recipe calls for 1. Again, we're doubling it. I'm putting the baking powder right into my flour, because then I'm gonna stir it and it's gonna be all mixed up. Now, this recipe didn't call for any salt, and I just always feel like salt really helps things, even sweet things. So I'm gonna do a little pinch of salt in here, unless I read the recipe wrong. I don't see any salt in there. So there's that. Got my spoon, gonna stir this around, because this is gonna go into, remember the other day, we did it very slowly, so we're not causing great poofs of flour to fly up in our face, and we'll definitely get to that. Okay, so now I'm gonna push the head up and I'm gonna scrape this butter, because all of it congregates on the bottom. That's what we went through the other day, was stuff congregating on the bottom of our mixing bowl, and that's just how it is when you're using a mixer. But for me, using a mixer is just the easiest thing to do. Can you hand do this? You can. Creaming butter sugar by hand is a project. You gotta have good muscles. So somebody like, you know, with really good guns, some friends of mine that go to the gym, they would be great candidates for creaming sugar themselves. I'm using a mixer. You can use a hand mixer to cream your butter and sugar, but then I would back off on it and just manually stir in the rest of the stuff. Otherwise, your flour is going to be too tough. Your banana bread's going to get tough. Okay, moving onward. I've got eggs again, because the next thing that's going to happen is once this is starting to cream up, we're going to add those eggs one at a time. And remember, I have my cute little deal right here, my little glass thing. So I'm gonna slow this way down. I'm gonna add an egg, and then I'll pump that up. And then I'm going to measure my bananas. I took bananas out of the freezer this morning. The bananas I showed you yesterday, I took them out of the freezer. And I take my potato masher and I mash my bananas. That's what I do. It's just easier that way. So, so got that going on. And now I'm going to measure those bananas into another liquid measuring cup, which I have right here. So 1 1/4, let's see, is that what it says? Mashed bananas. 1 1/4 cups mashed bananas is going to be 2 1/2 cups of mashed bananas if you double the recipe. So you can have someone who's good at math help you with this, Uh, but that would probably not be me. Anyway, so I now have, I definitely have a cup and a half of mashed banana. Oh, what would happen if I didn't have 2.5 cups of mashed banana? What would happen? What if I only had 2 cups of mashed banana? Well, I'm going to give you a secret. See this applesauce? Doesn't have to be a cup of applesauce. It can be a jar of applesauce. Use this applesauce to make up what you need. You'll never notice the taste difference. There will be no difference in the texture or how it bakes or anything. That is a good substitute if you don't quite have the total amount of banana for your banana bread. So there's that, and we'll set that aside for now because I still have to slowly add in 3 more eggs. So I'm busting them on the counter, I'm inspecting them, and I'm putting them in one at a time. Here comes egg number 3, and I gotta let this, I'm gonna actually take my scraper and I'm gonna scrape it again. You wanna do this several times, otherwise your ingredients will never incorporate properly if you don't take out this rubber scraper and scrape things down every once in a while. It's just a really helpful thing that you do. And that makes sure that all your ingredients are incorporating well. Okay, back to mixing that egg in. And I have my buttermilk over here with its really nice baking soda in there. Okay, I hate chopping nuts. I hate it. Really, it's one of my least favorite things to do. So, I think my husband made me put it away. I have a meat tenderizer. It's a metal thing. It's got spikes on it. Not only is it good for tenderizing meats, it's good for chopping nuts. Okay, I took this bag of pecans and it says broken. Well, I'm not gonna break pecans. I'm also not gonna chop pecans because it takes a long time and I hate that. So, you just pound them on a hard surface with a meat tenderizer or a spoon, or this thing's working, that's my salt container. But anyway, I'm just gonna put these down here while I'm chopping away on that, getting them all busted up so that and you can tell when they're all broken. They're gonna look like in, edible pieces. You don't want any real big pieces. Okay, so this thing looks like it needs another egg. Then we have 1 more egg. Okay, so now we're gonna stop after we added that egg. We're going to use our spatula once again. Okay, and we're gonna get all those ingredients off the bottom so that they aren't all congregated down there, having a party amongst themselves. So there we go. I'm gonna increase the speed now because I really want to get this moving. Now, this recipe is going to call for 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and I'm just going to wipe the spoon off a little bit. It had the baking powder on it. Once again, it's not a huge deal because they're all going to get happy and make friends anyway. So I'm going to back this way off. I'm going to add 1 more egg. That's our last egg. Turn it back up so that it incorporates. And while it's doing that, for this last round here, it's okay to add your vanilla while this is happening. So 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I like vanilla. So I don't always use a level teaspoon. I like to add a smidge extra. So I am kind of getting that a little bit more than a teaspoon. Okay, putting my vanilla away. Those are gonna go in there. Head's gonna come back up. Wanna do a final. See, that's incorporating nicely. Want to do a final thing, push with this, because now we're going to be alternating some ingredients like we alternated the other day. I apologize for the back of my head. I used to do theater and you weren't ever supposed to turn your back on the camera or the audience, but here I am doing exactly that. There goes the mixer again. We're going to put that on super speed right now because the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to start alternating banana with flour. My directions are right here. Stir baking soda into buttermilk. It does say that. sift baking powder. I didn't do that, I stirred it. Add vanilla and banana and mix, stir in pecans. Okay, so it doesn't really say on this when you are supposed to blend into cream mixture, so the bananas go last. Okay, so when you make a cake, you alternate wet ingredients with dry ingredients. So I guess this is going to tell me that I am just going to add the buttermilk, and I'm going to add it slowly. Okay, so because I don't, well, there's some of it just splashed anyway. Even though I have it on stir, it's still splashing. Okay, and I better pay attention to what I'm doing here. All right, so buttermilk, just kind of streaming it in slowly. And then I'm gonna have to do this because I want to get all that buttermilk and baking soda out of here. So again, I have a rubber scraper and I'm scraping the rest of that buttermilk in there because buttermilk is delicious and I love it. And so there is that, and boom, down again. I'm gonna turn that up a little bit higher, and then we're gonna start adding the flour. Again, we wanna have it kind of slow when we start adding that flour because we don't want it to pop up into our face. So here we go, here goes the flour. And it always gets on the side of the mixer, and I haven't quite figured out how to fix that yet. But I'll just add in a little bit at a time here. Some is gonna spill. That's not a huge deal. It'll all be okay in the end, I promise. So just let a little bit more of that in there. I wanna try to get at least a third of this bowl in there, because then I'm gonna get the rubber spatula out again and scrape it up. Okay, so here's my rubber spatula again, and just getting that all mixed around. This is probably the worst part about using a mixer, is getting down there and getting all that stuff. And I might be a little bit more obsessed than most people about getting that out of the bottom, but in any case, and if your bowl starts to loosen up, you're gonna wanna catch that and keep tightening it. So now while I have this head up, I am going to add a little bit more flour. Okay, and then I'm gonna show you what happens. Well, see how it's puffing up? It's kind of puffing out. And I really hate that. So, so that's why you want to do it just kind of slow. So again, over here on the side, we're gonna just try and get the rest of that flour in there. See, it's puffing up at me. And that's what happens when you try to go too fast. So one more time. Oops, how about if I stop that first? That usually works better, right? Okay, so this is coming off, and I'm stirring this up because the next thing that's going in is the bananas. And we are almost there. We are almost at the time where we will be putting it in our prepared banana loaf pans. Or if you want to do muffins, I'm not sure how many. Did that go on my face? I'm kind of guessing it did. But you know, I don't care, right? Okay, so I'm cooking. All right, so there's this. And speaking of adding things slowly, you're going to want to slowly add your bananas until they nicely incorporate. This is going to be messy business right here. This is messy business. But I can see that it's incorporating quite nicely. So I'm going to stop it again, pull the head up because this is looking beautiful. I want to get the very last bit of banana out of here. And remember, I did have the full 2.5 cups of bananas. If I had only had 2 cups of bananas or 2.25 cups of bananas, I would have measured this and used the applesauce to stretch it and make my banana bread. That's one of those emergency things that you can do if you don't have enough bananas. You can always sub it and it's still gonna be delicious. So there goes that. And that looks really, really, really good already. So we're gonna do this. And one more time. Now we're going to take the beater off, the paddle, and we're gonna scrape that again into the bowl because we want all this deliciousness to bake up into our loaves. Now, before I started this whole process, I preheated my oven. That's another thing that's really important. I preheated my oven to 300. 300, you say? Could that be a misprint on your recipe? No, it is not. One little known baking tip: it doesn't work for all baking things. It doesn't work for cookies. So I wouldn't do it on cookies. However, cakes, quick breads, they work better if you bake them at a lower temperature. So, and this has to bake for a long time. We have a lot of batter that has to cook here. Okay, so I'm throwing that in there. Here's my beautiful batter. I'm gonna push my mixer back, and then I'm gonna mix the rest of this up by hand. And I'm gonna grab my prepared pans. They're gonna go in my preheated oven. I preheated my oven to 300 degrees because my recipe says 300 degrees for 1.5 hours. That's a long time, but it's going to yield a very moist, very, very, very moist loaf of banana bread. And that's why breads, quick breads like that, brownies, things like that, will be extra super duper duper moist if you bake them longer at a lower temperature. So that's one of my other tricks today. So, okay, what did we learn today? We learned that we can substitute some applesauce if we don't have enough bananas. We learned that we don't have to chop nuts or put them in a food processor. We can put them in a Ziploc bag. And I will say, brand name Ziplocs work better than generic Ziplocs. I've lost a lot of nuts using inexpensive Ziploc bags. So in this situation, I would suggest that you use the name brand. Okay, so what I did was, I'll tell you what I did. I didn't measure my pecans, but that's okay because I eyeballed it and I think it is about 1.5 cups of pecans. Now I'm gonna pour that mixture into my prepared pans, which I greased and floured or sprayed with vegetable spray and floured earlier. And we're gonna try to split this into 2. And so you just gotta eyeball that and then kind of go from there. Okay, so you don't have to chop nuts. You can use a Ziploc and you can smash them with a meat tenderizer or a big spoon, or I'm not gonna say, let's see, what else could you use? Well, I was using my salt thing, although that's not real heavy. You'd want to use a heavy flat object. If anybody in your house, don't borrow anyone's paperweight. I'm not gonna say that. Okay, so a meat tenderizer actually works really well. A rolling pin. You could bang the nuts until they break up with a rolling pin. That works really well. Okay, so now I have half my batter in this pan, and I think I have a little bit more than half in this pan, so I'm gonna scoop it from the middle. I'm gonna scoop it from the middle because if I tip it out the side, it's gonna be all over the side of my banana bread loaf, and that's not gonna make me very happy, or anybody else that eats it, right? Okay, so same thing like I did the other day. Today though, I have a cut on my finger and I'm not wearing gloves, so I'm not going to clean off that spatula like I did the other day. I'm just gonna kind of run it on the edge of this pan. And I do see a little bit more batter in here, so I do wanna make sure I get that. Okay, I'm gonna bang it down again on the countertop like I did the other day, okay? Just because I think it brings the bubbles up to the top. You want to wipe off the edges of your pan, okay? Because if you don't, they'll turn into hard, crunchy things that aren't good, hard, crunchy things. Okay, this was a very long video. Thank you for sticking out the banana bread. I hope you learned a lot today. Thank you and enjoy your banana bread. Bye.